What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. We're just out on the Tongsheng TSDZ8 mid-drive motor. We got the Powallan 48 volt 20 amp hour battery. So my Tongsheng, the TSDZ8, it's on the open source firmware, the OSF. So I've got the open source firmware in hybrid mode, and that's where the pedal assist power is based on your cadence and on your torque. So it's kind of like half, I think it multiplies your torque by your cadence, and then that is the power output. So I think like when you're going slow and then you press really hard on the pedals, it gives you a lot of power. But then once you get moving, like if you're really cranking and your cadence is increasing, then it'll also give you lots of power. And so that's one thing that I've noticed is helpful, is like when you're pedaling faster, if the motor, because the torque sensor works the best when you first start out pedaling, right? And there's a lot of resistance on the cranks when you pedal. But then once you get moving, if you're spinning faster at a higher cadence, there's not as much resistance on the pedals, and so you won't be pushing the torque sensor as hard. So I think the hybrid mode, like a combination of torque and cadence-based assistance, is probably the best of both worlds. I think when you go slow, like the torque sensor should kind of be the main thing, but then once you get moving, it seems like a combination of two kind of works better. One thing about the SRAM Guide T brake is kind of interesting. Like I've tried Shimano MT200s before, and the SRAM Guide T, it feels like it has a lot more modulation. Oh, did we get the, oh my god, we got the Air 7 right there. Terrible, man. This might be a problem today. I can barely walk up this. I think I shifted under load right there. So something I've noticed, ooh, heads up beat, please don't sting me, please don't sting me. Something I've noticed is that the open source firmware, sometimes when you hit a bump or something, or I've noticed two situations, like when you're pedaling really hard on the torque sensor and it's like hard to pedal, it can do the Air 7. And then also I've noticed, like if you're accelerating hard, that's kind of hard to pedal, and then you hit a bump and it like makes your wheel bounce off the ground. I think I've seen an Air 7 from that. Also shifting under load might have been what happened there for the Air 7, but it seems like the open source firmware has like some it seems like it has some issues with dealing with like a shock load, like when there's a sudden change in resistance on the cranks in the motor. Let's try these brakes out a little bit. Yeah, those are a lot better. Gotta be careful with the front brake, but I've been trying the Zoom X-TEC HB100 brakes, and it's got like it's a cable pull. So it's like a mechanical brake for the most part, but then the caliper is hydraulic with fluid in it. And so they're different from most mechanical brakes because it does have a hydraulic caliper and it presses on the brake pad from both sides. But something happened to them. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe like the fluid, the brake fluid that they put in the caliper isn't very good or something, but my rear brake, probably one that I use more, that heats up more. The rear one, it's like it works good for like the first half of pressing the brake lever, but then if you squeeze the brake lever really hard, like where you usually get the full power with mechanical brakes, I don't know. It's like the second half percentage of the brake lever doesn't even do anything. Or like something is messed up with them, and they're not working as good as they once were. So let's take the open source firmware up this black diamond climb and see what happens. I wanted to hit that stick at an angle where it wasn't gonna twist the stick over into my wheel. Okay, so here's a little bit of a tricky climb over here. That I have trouble with even when my bike is working. So let's see. It does seem more controllable, like the... Oh man, I'm so conflicted about this. Oh, it just got that Air 7 again. It pretty consistently gets that Air 7 when you're like... what are these bugs doing? What the fuck is going on here? It's scaring me. Oh boy, we gotta turn this off and back on again. So this overcurrent air, the Air 7, is the main problem that I've been having with this thing. And I think like it's just got something to do with when the motor, like either all of a sudden it becomes a lot harder to pedal, or all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to pedal. And then it's like the motor gets the Air 7 from the overcurrent. But if I was to look at the watt meter, it says 1012 watts peak. So it's only doing 1,000 watts, 19.68 amps. And I looked at the source code, and that Air 7 is supposed to only happen when it goes above like 31 amps for the TSDZ8. So I don't know, like, I don't know why it's getting that Air 7. I asked the Google AI about it, and it went down some rabbit hole, and it was telling me to like open up the motor and look at the shunt resistors and do all this crazy stuff. Like, I guess if the shunt resistors in one batch of motors have a different resistance than a different batch of motors, then the firmware might be programmed to just work with one value for like one type of resistor, but then if you have a motor with the other type of a resistor with different resistance, like the firmware will be measuring current wrong or something. I'm starting to wonder if that's what is happening, because, or like if there's just some kind of like Air 7 bug right now in the firmware, because I've seen other people complaining about it on the forum. Oh, I'm surprised the motor didn't bottom out there. So this is where I need a good brake. Man, my rear brake. I gotta bug it. I gotta get my goggles. Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh my God. Oh, bugs. Oh. Man, my rear brake, it feels like it's coated in oil or something. Like, it's just not working whatsoever. Well, it's working to some extent, but it's like when you really need it, it's not there. And I gotta get the other SRAM guide T going. Better get my backpack straps done up here so they're not making noise the whole time. Whew. Alright, so I'm not sure what happened right there, but my GoPro went for 15 minutes and it said that the battery was at 77% or something, and it just turned itself off for some reason. It is kind of hot and sticky out here today. There's this smallmouth bass. We're gonna do that in a second. So I got these Ergon GP3 grips. These are a lot better. I wish I could make this thing do a little bit more power when it just feels like the factory firmware was doing more. I feel like I'm going a lot slower. It does seem like this could work good. The open source firmware is probably good for people that want to pedal their bike like a bike. Or if you want some more customization over how the pedal assist feels. It does feel better. But I had kind of become accustomed to the stock firmware, and it just felt punchier so far. So let's do the smallmouth bass first. Like a double right there. Oh. Never really. This is like the second time I've gone down this. So I'm not familiar with any of this. I got a big tabletop right there. So you basically just have to send it down that one. And we're back here. Kind of a lot of work just to do that little trail, but I've never done it on camera before. I'm gonna turn the camera back off till we get back over there. I think I still need to calibrate the torque sensor a little bit, even when I'm on pedal assist 5 and I'm in the right gear. Oh, it just did the Air 7 again because I hit a rock and then the rear wheel spun. So then error 2, that's because I had my foot on the pedals when I turned the bike on. You guys are learning a lot today with me, huh? And I'm hoping I can just get this thing going again here. Let's see. We're in the right gear. So I think on the factory firmware that I was using, I think it was kind of based on your torque, but I think that it was a lot easier to max out the torque sensor, so maybe I should lower, I don't know, like I gotta make it so that the torque sensor gives me a little bit more power on my highest gear. But I think we need to fix, I think there's like some bugs that need to get fixed or something first, because I set this thing with enough amps and enough watts to where it should be, you know, doing as much as possible. And let's see, what are we getting? Let's see how hot the motor is. 19.68 amps. (1,000 watts). Motor is pretty hot. I can't keep my finger on there. I can't keep my hand down there for more than like 2 or 3 seconds. Kind of interesting. I don't think I turned on the field weakening because I think I left that off in the settings, because it didn't seem like it was even doing anything. Like when I turned on field weakening, it didn't seem like it increased the no load speed in the stand at all. So it seems like, so there is the largemouth bass. That's kind of a, it's kind of a fun trail. It's got that drop. Oh, I want to kind of, whoa, 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 whoa. I didn't see that stump on the ground and it totally stopped me there. So I don't know if like, I don't know, there's a lot of questions yet. I'm still getting used to having this hydraulic brake. The lever is a lot smaller and I can pull it with one finger, so now I gotta like change the whole way that I do this. Oh man, did my I think my brake magnet might have moved a little bit or something. Like, what's going on here? We've got a moving brake magnet. I found some super glue that was in the drawer. And I thought it was like the super glue that dries fast, but then I put it on there and it was like Gorilla Glue that says it takes like 24 hours to cure, and it was like, what? Why did you put it in a super glue bottle? So one thing I'm wondering about is like if you, I think if you go off a jump or something and the motor is still trying to go, like, and then all of a sudden the motor can just spin freely, you might get an Air 7 when you go airborne. And that is really annoying. Like, that used to happen on a phase runner with my 72 volt BBS HD. That was one of the things with the phase runner that I could never really fix on my BBS HD. Was like when the wheel would go airborne and then all of a sudden there's no resistance on the motor, it would just do some like crazy spike error, kind of like this thing does, the Air 2. So apparently, like, it's kind of confusing for motor controllers when it comes to mid drives, is when you're like switching gears, or like if the wheel comes off the ground or something, all of a sudden it's a lot easier for the motor to spin, like no resistance. And then when it does shift into the next gear, or when the wheel hits the ground again, it goes from like a no resistance kind of state to like lots of resistance, and there's a shock load. And then the motor tries to do a lot of current to compensate and start moving again, but then it seems like the open source firmware, and apparently even the phase runner, have problems. And I emailed Gauntlet, and they just said, oh yeah, that's just how it works. There's not much you can do about it if the you know. But it's like, it's one of these things where it's kind of like, sometimes getting a third-party controller like a phase runner or a flipski to work with the mid-drive requires kind of like special considerations and settings and programming. This hybrid mode, it feels like when I first start going, I first start pedaling, it kind of like boosts me up to speed pretty quickly. And then after that, it feels like it's based on my cadence. So sometimes it kind of feels like with hybrid mode, like it's easy to get going. But then once you get moving, like you really got to be spinning your legs for it to go, or else you have to like keep it in you have to keep it in a gear where there's resistance on the cranks, or else the torque sensor just won't be doing a whole lot. Right now it feels like it's based on torque. Whenever you're going up a hill or going up something slow, it'll probably be based on torque too, because the torque sensor is seeing a lot of pressure, and you're not pedaling very fast. It's kind of a mixed bag. Mid drives are tricky. There's a little creature of the prairie back there. A little prairie dog or something, I don't know. Oh. I would say that the open source firmware definitely makes it feel more like riding a bike though. Like the factory firmware was kind of like, it felt like the torque sensor, I don't know. I'm pretty conflicted about this whole Tongsheng situation. I wish the open source firmware just felt as punchy and as powerful as the factory firmware, because then it would be like the best of both worlds. But it seems like in its current state, there's something about the open source firmware that just isn't quite as good as the factory firmware. I don't know if it's just because the factory one was pulling more current somehow or what, or if there's some bugs in the open source one or what. I do feel like I'm going slower, I don't know. Maybe I need to try the power mode or something. That front brake works pretty good, I like that. Gotta get used to that though. Just using one finger on that thing. Yeah, it seems like my magnet is slightly too far away. Let's see here. Like a little bit of play is in the lever at this point or something? I don't know. Let's see here. Yeah, it seems like my lever, there's like a little bit of play in my lever now since I started riding. That wasn't there when I started out. I don't know. So the magnet is moving slightly out of range. I like to try and set up my brake cutoff so that they're really responsive, and it's kind of like the magnet is exactly the perfect distance away from the sensor, so that right when you push the lever at all, it hits the brakes. But sometimes the lever itself has a little bit of play in it, and it can move around and wiggle. Or like if your finger is resting on it, like it'll move out of range of the sensor, and then it thinks that the brakes are on just when your finger is resting on the lever. I was pretty surprised by how small the SRAM Guide T caliper is. Let's take a look at it down there. See, look at the SRAM Guide T caliper and how small that thing is. It's kind of weird, like I could barely get an Allen in here. It's like you almost need to use a ball head Allen to screw this thing on, because you don't have a straight shot to get a wrench in this thing. Kind of weird. Kind of a weird deal there. Let's look at the watt meter. What does it say? 19.68 amps. Kind of the same as before. 1012 watts peak. Yeah, my damn magnet. Oh, this is annoying. Drop her down. Okay. Oh, man, my brakes are scaring me. dropper. Oh, I don't think I'm gonna do my dropper again. It feels like something's wrong with it. I don't want it to get stuck down. Man, there's like a branch sticking down right in your face when you hit that rock jump. Luckily I have my goggles on, or I would have just got a stick in the eye. Somebody forgot their water bottle back there. So how many Air 7s have we got? I wasn't really counting. 2 or 3? So I guess if you're not just like obsessed with speed and you just want to ride a bike and pedal it, that's kind of what this open source firmware is for. It's kind of just making the behavior better. It's not really making it feel more powerful. I have a rattle going on in the front of my bike, and I thought it was my cheap brakes from before, but I guess it wasn't. I will say that back there at the beginning of the Hawkeye, I'm not sure what the deal was, but when I switched out the GoPro and then I like started going again, it just felt like I wasn't getting as much power. I don't know. It definitely seems like when it switches from torque to cadence and you're kind of spinning the cranks faster, it feels like when you got a lot of torque on the cranks, you're getting the power, but then when it goes into the cadence mode, like it's not quite as powerful as when you're really pressing on the pedals and it's reading the torque. So I wonder if I boost the settings for, I mean, I think my understanding is the settings were all at the like pedal assist 5 should be max settings. So I don't know. I mean, I set the amps higher. I tried to just unlimit it today, basically. Someone came around that corner back there crazy fast and slammed on their brakes, and looks like they went off the trail. It might sound like I'm complaining, but I'm just kind of used to e-bikes that use a lot more power, like watts. It does feel like when I pedal hard, like it gives you a little bump in power. So maybe it's just my torque sensor calibration, like I've kind of got it calibrated in such a way where I have to press on it a little bit harder than I would like. We'll have to play with that. But sometimes when I'm just kind of spinning the cranks at a comfortable cadence, and it's not using the torque sensor, it's using the cadence or the power mode or whatever, it feels like that doesn't give you as much power as the torque mode. And then when I shift it into a higher gear and all of a sudden there's more resistance on the cranks, it kind of feels like it just takes off all of a sudden because the torque sensor has a higher value. When you build an e-bike for the purposes of riding on a trail, it's kind of hard to just like test it out in your driveway. Like, you kind of actually need a trail where you can test it. Because on a trail, you're just hitting bumps and like your tires are like breaking loose, spinning on over rocks, and like you're shifting between gears a lot, and you're going from high RPM to low RPM, and pedaling fast to pedaling slow. There's just a lot going on the trails. When I just focus on pedaling it like a bike though, and shifting my gears, it does feel pretty good. The behavior wise. These ergon grips are awesome. I love these things. So much more comfortable. I think half of the reason that I would get all sore and tired out before is because my grips just sucked and they didn't have any support for your palms. These things are awesome. So I wonder how hot the motor is. Kind of curious, because with the factory firmware, the motor wasn't really overheating when I was out on the trail. It still says 1012 watts peak, like it hasn't done any more than that yet. Oh yeah, so the motor's not hot anymore. It seems like when this motor is going lower speeds and you're kind of shifting through your gears and stuff, like it feels really powerful, so it works good on the trails. But like when you get this thing out on the street, like 1000 watts just isn't very much. So, oh, it's kind of a dilemma. because I like it on the streets, but then when I get out on the street, or I like it on the trails, but then when I get out on the streets, it's like I just feel like I'm gonna get run over because you're only going like 25 miles an hour. When I was riding over here on the streets, I was having trouble like getting this thing going 30 miles an hour, and I would say it was barely going 28. And if you get it going down a hill or something, you can get it going faster than 30, like any bike. But when I was on the Punchiness factory firmware, I could get that thing going like 33 miles an hour on flat when I was pedaling and had it in full power. I'm not even used to riding with my left hand on the front brake. Whoa. John Denver was telling me that he bled his Zoom X-TEC HB100 brakes, like bled the caliper, and they were working a lot better. But I think I'm gonna put a hydraulic back there. You need some good brakes for riding on the trail, I think. Oh. See, when I just shifted it into gear there and the torque sensor took over, like, it felt like it was doing more power. It's gonna be awesome when I get that rear brake on here. I'm just gonna be able to absolutely rip around. I still feel like this rear brake is slowing me down a lot. Like, it just doesn't work good. The rear brake is the one that I need the most. All right, we're back out here. When the GoPro turned off, there was like this crazy hawk or some kind of a big bird just swooping in front of me, and then the GoPro turned off because it overheated again. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Man, sometimes, oh, that rear brake. Sometimes I'm scared to hit the front brake because I'm on something loose, and my rear brake is just like totally sponging out. The brake levers on hydraulic brakes are always a lot better though than those cheap e-bike brake levers for cables. Might have to see if the motor is secure, if that lock nut is on there tight. We might have developed the bottom bracket rattling. What is that? It just got terrible. What is that? Is that my watt meter? What's going on here? Huh. Oh no. $19.73 amps peak. Oh man, I think my rear coil started creaking, like it got dirty or something. I gotta bounce that thing out. Oh, man. Oh man, what is going on? We got a rattle trap going on here. I think something got into my shock and it's like rattling, it's like creaking now. It's terrible. Oh. Oh my God. God, this thing is pissing me off. What happened to that piece of shit? Oh my God. I don't know how much longer I can handle that shock creaking. I gotta figure out how to mount that other thing on here. About had it with this piece of shit. Okay. I'm kind of conflicted about this open source firmware situation. And the shock creaking. Oh my God. Oh. Alright guys, well we're just riding on the road. I think in my highest gear, down a hill, and I got going like 30 is it. So I would say it's open source firmware is definitely a little bit slower for whatever reason. So now I'm just going to engage the throttle and go back home at 20 miles an hour for 9 miles or 10 miles or something. Oh, see, it just feels like it's going slow on the street, like it's not doing as many total watts, or it's not, it's like even when I'm hitting the throttle, I kind of want to like pedal to make it go faster, like it's like the throttle isn't giving me full power or something. I don't know, like it just, I'm gonna have to put the stock firmware back on here and feel that again and measure how many amps it uses. Because I'm going like 20 miles an hour. Guess if you have any suggestions about the TSDZ8 open source firmware and what's going on with it and why it's so slow, let me know in the comments. I'll have to sit down with the Google AI. I'll probably have to pull down the source code and start changing code in the firmware or something. I don't know. Unless my configuration's wrong in some way, but until then, I'm going 20 miles an hour and it's a little bit underwhelming on the streets. It works good on the trails, like it still feels a little bit slower on the trails too, I would say. Like it was a little bit more punchy with the factory firmware. Overall, just all the time bugs. But oh man, all right, well, my current thoughts are it's a good motor if you actually want to pedal your bike, but sometimes I like to throttle my bike down the street fast and then I like to pedal my bike on the trail. And right now it's like very underwhelming on the streets and slightly underwhelming on the trails, but the pedal assist behavior does feel better. I emailed Lee from Powallon. I'm gonna see if Lee has any contacts or any connections over at Tongsheng. I was hoping maybe Lee could give me like the Tongsheng programming kit or something, so I could, because I like the factory firmware and it's like 95% there, but if I could just change a few things slightly, like a few delays. It's like the only problem that I have with the factory one. It's just a few delays. Like when you start pedaling, it takes a little bit, there's kind of a delay on the torque sensor when you start pedaling. Factory firmware, like when you started pedaling, it would usually take like half a rotation of the cranks or like a full rotation of the cranks before the torque sensor would actually like kick in. So, and then on the factory firmware, when you stop pedaling, it feels like the motor like keeps going for a second. Let me know what you guys are doing in the comments. Steve Cummings, what are you doing, buddy? You riding that X-TEC out in California? Or are you riding the hay bike Mars? Let me know which e-bikes you're riding in the comments. I have this car behind me that's like scared to go past me or something. It seems like I'm only going 20 miles an hour and they're scared. Oh, there they go. If I never upload another video, it's because I was going 20 miles an hour at the Tongsheng TSDZ8 open source firmware and somebody ran me down. So make sure you like and subscribe and say a prayer. Oh, because I've got a long way to go. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. I'm shifting it into a high gear and we're going home, bubs. Peace out. Thanks for watching. Alright guys, so this is what I'm talking about when I say I get like halfway through the battery and then this thing, it just like won't go at all. So what I'm in, my 5th gear or something? We're going 16 miles an hour, 6th gear, like, man, it's like it'll barely get going 25 miles an hour at this point, and I don't know what the deal is with this thing. Okay, we're shifting up through the gears. Oh man. I can barely get it going 25 miles an hour. When the voltage starts to drop to 48, it's like it'll barely go 25. It's crazy. It makes traveling home a little bit frustrating and dangerous when I can only go 20 miles an hour. Oh, this light is never gonna see me. What's going on? So yeah, I don't know, it's not going very fast. So I'm exhausted and it's a little bit frustrating. I think I don't know how much I'm gonna mess around with this if this is all the faster it goes, because it's just kind of slowing me down here. Oh. We're barely going 20 miles an hour here. Alright guys, so I used 9.94 amp hours that time, 409 watt hours, 21.42 amps peak. 1035 watts peak. So I used like half of the battery again. Used a little bit more because I was using slightly more amps. So it did do like 21.42 amps at some point. Oh my god, it's hot. It's really hot too. Like it just felt like it was going really slow the whole time. And it just feels like crazy hot. Like I can't even leave my finger on it. So that's been my experience so far with the TSDZ8 open source firmware. I think I'm gonna put the factory firmware back on there for now, because this, unfortunately, like unless I can get this thing to do like 300 more watts or something and feel as punchy as the factory firmware, like it just doesn't really work for me. So if anybody has any ideas how to get this thing doing more power with the open source firmware, let me know. like and subscribe. I'll probably mess around with this a little bit further, but unless I can get this figured out and kind of like more comparable with the factory firmware, I'm probably just gonna go back to the factory firmware and maybe reach out to Tongsheng or something and see if there's some way that they can send me a different firmware that works slightly different. I don't know. Or if they have some kind of a tool that can configure the motor, because this open source firmware, just so far, like, the behavior is okay, but it kind of feels like a downgrade to like a 500 watt e-bike that can only go 20 miles an hour. So, and that just doesn't work for me for how I ride. So when I'm riding on the streets, like, that's just not going to cut it. I'm going to get run over. So I need a motor that can go 25 to 30 miles an hour, even when the battery is going dead, like, you know, like all day long. So we'll have to mess around with this a little bit further and see if I can get this thing working for my purposes, but might just go back to the factory firmware, to be honest. So that's been my experience. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. See you guys next time on the TSDZ8 open source firmware series. Peace out. Later, bubs.